Welcome to Instruction Discussion, our weekly look at the latest topics and trends in education affecting schools here on Long Island and schools around the world. Whether you're a teacher, parent, or student, listen for tips and strategies to help you navigate the educational landscape. There's a bell. It's time to start today's Instruction Discussion on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
Hello, I'm Kevin Boston Hill, and welcome to Instruction Discussion, where each week we will examine a recent trend or development in education and its impact on Long Island. We know about the controversy surrounding the curriculum of the 1619 Project and states seeking to ban the AP Black History course, as well as some states seeking to effectively rewrite their history books when it comes to how people of color are represented. Go beyond the controversy, and we see that there are actual people who are the subject of these debates, people who should not be marginalized to make their telling and retelling of the story more palatable. If this country is to be great, it must embrace every dirty secret as well as the glowing endorsements. To help us understand how learning about Black history intertwines with all of history, today we welcome Dr. Ptahsen-Shabazz, educator and Chair of Africana Studies at Nassau Community College. Dr. Shabazz attended Howard University and the University of South Carolina on a track scholarship and earned a degree in broadcast journalism and mass communications. He then earned master's and PhD degrees in African American Studies from Temple University. He is author of the book Black to the Roots, Reggae's Rise, Downpression and Reascension, founded the website blacktoTheRoots.net, and is an international speaker. Today, he joins us in the classroom. Dr. Shabazz, welcome to Instruction Discussion on 90.3 WHPC.
I give thanks, Brother Boston. Great pleasure. Honored always by the spirit of the Creator and ancestors to move us in this time. Giving thanks.
No, thank you. Thank you for being here as well. Even though we are some probably contemporaries, I do like to listen to the elders and the advice from the elders, and you remind me of that every time. Before we actually get into our major discussion, tell us a little bit about your book, Black to the Roots, Reggae's Rise, Downpression and Reascension.
Give thanks. My book was really based upon my dissertation that I completed at Temple University in Philadelphia for Africana Studies. And the book, although based upon my dissertation, was really based upon my life awakening in Black consciousness. I grew up in a house that was lots of music in my house. But my mother's from Jamaica, and reggae was in my house. When hip-hop was coming on the scene, I was kind of like an enigma in our culture because everyone was listening to their Walkman and hip-hop, but in my soundtrack was reggae music. And in the 1980s, when I went away to college, I was looking for this music that was feeding my Black consciousness because reggae in the 70s, it was fueled with Black history, Black culture, Black consciousness, Black positivity, Black pride. And I was just looking forward to growing up with this music as I was a teenager at that time. But when I went to college in the 1980s, I began to hear a shift that was taking place in the music that once had such vital Black power meaning, became almost nihilistic and almost turned inside out on itself. It became dangerous to the inner population in terms of sexism, in terms of Black on Black violence, in terms of those themes. And I began to wonder, how does a music that was once moving in such a positive direction automatically and shift so suddenly? And that led me to my dissertation research, which led to the publication of that book, which suggests that it wasn't a natural change like what we saw happen with jazz and rock and roll and R&B. My book is entitled the Black to the Roots, The Rise, Downpression and Reascension of Roots Reggae, but there was a book that was written whose author's name escapes me right now, but it was called The Death of Rhythm and Blues, Nelson George, The Death of Rhythm and Blues. And And the same paradigm, the same approach of corporations and musical corporations and producers working in alignment with musical lawyers and things of that nature have worked to squeeze and transform the black power in music, not only in terms of the message, but even in terms of the economics that could really empower our communities as well.
It's funny, so it's amazing how you talk about the music and how music has changed, because I think every culture, every group, and every generation can talk about it through the music of that generation. And like you said, we grew up in the 60s and 70s talking about, you had Marvin Gaye talking really about the community and how we wanted to uplift the community. James Brown, that's the name of the
Say It Loud.
Say It Loud, right.
Mm-hmm.
So we had that music, and then, like I said, going into the 70s, we had a little bit of that same thing. And then, like you said, something happened in the 80s.
Something happened.
That is ironic that we're celebrating the 50th anniversary of hip hop, but that's when it started to turn. Yes, you started with Melly Mel and the Furious Five with the message, and that was really about the community and so forth. That was probably a positive thing.
It was a message.
Right, it was a message,
yes,
right?
Sir. Yes,
but
sir.
But then it transformed quickly into something else. We got into the NWAs and the Ice-T's and that type of music and everything else. Mm-hmm. How important is it for music to be to a community?
Yeah, man. For our tradition of African people, ascendants or people of African ancestry, music was always vital in our cultural traditions. So, even as we, in this hemisphere, it hasn't changed. And the most vital and revolutionary, as well as the most redeeming expressions of renewal, have come out of our music. The most progressive transformations that we've made as a people, seem to be always tied to our music traditions. And, from the time of slavery, really, the enemies of our rise, and we have enemies. Mm-hmm. We have enemies against our rise. And they've noticed from the time of slavery, they've known our culture and they've known the power that there exists in music. I always like to remind students that in North America, the power of our music was so known by slave masters that it was outlawed for an African to make a drum, that an African could lose a hand, lose a limb, or be sold away from his family. That was the power of communication and inspiration.
Yeah, because drum beats could be heard for miles away, right?
Yeah. And the art of drumming had risen to such a high level in traditional African society that there is a phenomenon that's known as a talking drum that used to be universal in some cultures in West Africa before colonialism and slavery, but through that downpression, has only been retained by certain initiates of tradition today. But, the music is so vital in our tradition and in the rise of our people. And so you can kind of chart the movement of our people based upon the type of music that we're producing in that era, and how dismaying it is, when we turn on the radio and can't find any wholesome music to listen to. The music that we're hearing, in the transformation of hip hop is a toxic music that is poisonous to its listeners instead of healing.
Now there will be some people who would say that, okay, we're just being the old men on the lawn saying get off my lawn type of thing, and because hip hop is the type of music that is the music of the generation, and it's the way that they express themselves. So how do we juxtapose that argument to what we're actually listening to? Music
is grounded in social philosophy, and when a people lose control of their social philosophy, then the music that is produced can actually articulate the ideals and principles of the social philosophy philosophies of others. Anything of value to a culture is consciously produced for positivity and has that kind of value. Yet things that would be of the opposite nature, seem to come from the opposite design. And, a mature people, cultivate, that type of quality of selection. And it really speaks to the breakdown of a lot of this social values in our community, to see the music where it's at right now, that we could have musical artists that would articulate ideas and messages that quite often, make them collaborators in their own downpression. That really shows the power of slavery's spell, that still mesmerizes, generations of our people that have not been addressed in terms of cultivating a cultural sense of ideals and values.
And it's amazing that you bring up that particular point, because it seems there's an argument that says that the slave master mentality has kind of transformed or infiltrated the music industry, because the music executives will only ask for certain types of music to be produced. So even if you have an artist who wants to be more socially conscious, like a Common, they're not going to necessarily get the airplay because their songs aren't going to be produced. But when you have somebody who wants to talk about genocide and all the other ills of the community, that's what gets produced. So, of course, that's what gets put out there in the public. So we think that's what we're all about.
Yeah, and this is not by chance. This is by design that, although my book was on reggae, it looked at the whole music market. And on May 11th, 1972, there was a study that was put out by Harvard University that was commissioned by Columbia Records to examine the black music market with the intention to create a corporate takeover of the black music market. And at the early part of the 70s, the black music market was a budding, powerful black power entity. But by the end of the 70s, it would be transformed and co-opted by major corporations. And so that has been the design. And like I mentioned, Nelson George's Death of Rhythm and Blues, his book really looks at a thesis that looks at from the time of ragtime through rhythm and blues, how our music has been transformed by corporate design, representing the slave master's interest and not necessarily the interest of the inspired cultural masses whose inspiration from on high is producing messages that are really designed to unlock the chains of oppression. Yeah.
You are listening to Instruction Discussion on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. My name is Kevin Boston Hill, and our guest today is Dr. Ptahsen-Shabazz, educator and chair of Africana Studies at Nassau Community College, and author of the book, Black to the Roots, Reggae's Rise, Downpression and Reascension. So let's shift gears just a little bit, and because we touched on slavery and all of that. So I want to go to the 1619 Project, just really briefly, because when that project became public, it caused a real public uproar. Why all that controversy about a time in history that we know took place? And we're just trying to really get the truth about what happened.
Yeah, Bobby, you're bringing up a topic that I don't even really like to give attention to.
Okay.
But yeah, it's something worthy of giving attention to. The 1619 Project that was put together by our sister that's at Howard University. I think her name is Sister Jones, Professor Jones, Hannah Jones, I believe.
Yes.
Man, that her work is dynamic in terms of really laying out for the blind even to see the way that race has been constructed in American history from 1619 to our present to create a type of caste system in American society that will run perpetually, unless it's examined, addressed, and deconstructed. And so that's what the 1619 project, essentially was by the sister was, just, I believe, really a continuation of what was formerly known as critical race theory, which was a critical examination of the infrastructure of the laws of the systemic creation of racism by law in American society. That critical race theory was put together in the 1970s by black lawyers that constructed a curriculum that looked at the legal layout of racism in American society. And so that's what the 1619 project is. That's what critical race theory is. And, this has become the right wing flag to wave right now, to seek attention, to seek propaganda, and I think to call out the sides, of the humane versus the inhumane, because here we're talking about a people's right to know their heritage, to know their history, and to shape themselves in a world for the future.
Right, and I think where this becomes an issue is because the whole idea of the critical race theory and so forth, it really shines that light on the fact that there is systemic racism, and it's not just people you see on the streets and different clubs and organizations here, but it's ingrained, it's system-wide, it's systemic throughout everything that we do, government, business, or what have you. And that's the area that needs to be addressed. But again, people are shy to talk about it.
Yeah. Well, we just lost a great lawyer by the name of Alton Maddox, who became infamous, because of his defense of Tawana Brawley about 30 years ago. But Alton Maddox, man, he was one of our greatest lawyers that defended black humanity. And one of the statements that he quite often would make was that, in terms of looking at blacks in the legal system, the only real law or the court decision that we really needed to focus on was the Dred Scott decision of 1857. And that was a decision that suggested that by law that there was no law that white people were obliged to follow,
right?
And that had any legitimacy in regard to black people. And so, when we realistically look at our place in society from that position, then it really demands for us much more than inclusion in someone's experiment. This United States government is really a criminal's experiment, because it has really robbed a land from a people, it has stolen a people to this land, and now at this late juncture, when there's an opportunity in the 21st century to, make corrections and make amends with the historical fallacies and faults of the past. It's the same spirit of denial. It's the same spirit of inhumanity. And so, in the midst of that reality, we have to be working on several fronts, I think, brother.
No, you're absolutely right, and I hope that this can be one of those fronts.
Yeah.
And fast forward just a little bit, because we know the College Board has spent years in crafting and curating its curriculum regarding their African American Studies curriculum to make it worthy of advanced placement or AP status. But now you have this movement of some states, and we won't name which ones, but some states that are looking to ban its use or to force the College Board to kind of water down that curriculum. What's the harm in having such a curriculum to begin with? And two, what is the detriment of watering down that curriculum?
Well, the harm in having the curriculum is it's for the people that are trying to prevent it. And it's, I mean, to speak plainly to the reality, I mean, we're living in a world where populations are shifting and demographics are shifting. And a white population that used to be predominant and majority in American society, it's becoming now the minority. And as it becomes the minority, it will defend itself as a minority if it can keep the populations that are the majority absent of their humanity. And the way that you keep a people absent of their humanity is keeping them absent of their history, their heritage, their culture, their identity, all those things that would empower them to challenge and question, the disregard of their humanity in the present status quo of this criminal enterprise that we call the United States, of America. So I think that's one angle to the question that you asked. I forget what the other.
And I guess what's the detriment of watering down the curriculum?
The detriment of watering down the curriculum is creating a population that, what kind of population do we want in the future for American society? And, that's not even really a question that I quite often ask myself. But as the professor, I throw it out there for the students. For myself, I really see, as I said, we need to be working on many fronts. And perhaps the front that we're not working most on enough is the sovereign front. Is the sovereign front, is the front where we, really speak about not forcing institutions to do right by us that are designed and set up to not do right by us. But at the same time, while we have people working on that end of the scale, we need to really be doing more to create our own institutions, to create our own communities, to strengthen our own communities instead of trying to put all of our social energy towards reforming, a government and a society that is entrenched on doing the wrong thing.
I think that makes a lot of sense, because when we think about in terms of the AP courses and the exams, we know that colleges look extremely favorably on those students who have taken a bunch of AP courses and do well in those courses and so forth. They get the higher GPAs. But now we're talking about access, because how often do our students of color have access to those AP exams? And now when you're talking about taking one where they can actually learn about people who look like them, and you're reducing the curriculum to the point where some colleges aren't even looking at it as rigorous anymore, so they're not accepting that credit. So I think it's about educational equity, that you're limiting the opportunities for our young people to even enroll into the AP courses, because they don't see the coursework that reflects them, and whatever coursework does is not being recognized by the institutions that they're trying to get into.
Yeah, well, it's the denial of our culture and our history is really it's a denial of our humanity. It's a denial of our humanity, and so that's the ultimate design is to make us accept a second class status in American society. And what was Trump's motto? Make America great again. And what was the model of greatness? It was the model of a segregated American society. And so, we have to look at that, at the reality of the social political world that we're existing in. And as we think about, how to guide our children in the next 50 to 100 years, we look at what we've struggled to make occur in the last 50 years and ask, as I think even Harry Belafonte mentions when he talks about his recollections with Dr. King in Dr. King's last year, Harry Belafonte stated that Dr. King, in a pensive moment, stated to him that he was worried, to Harry Belafonte. He was worried as to whether he was really integrating his people into a burning house. You know, he was beginning to worry and fear that all of his life's energy, you know, had been spent to try to integrate his people into a burning house.
Wow.
And so if Dr. King could see that in his last year, and in his last year, he wrote an essay entitled Racism and the White Backlash. In that essay, he suggested that every step that had been made to progress in terms of the civil rights movement, you know, there were reactionaries that were pushing it 2 steps back every step of the way. That laws that usually run for society, you know, that are adhered to, civil rights laws were quite often ignored and needed to be brought into court to defend itself and advance itself again and again. And so, yeah, man, we need vigilance on all sides. We need people to work as reformers, but
I'm sure
Africa awaits its creators, and we need people to really create institutions that will serve ourselves.
Since you bring that up, I know that, and speaking to some of my professor colleagues as well, and I'm going to ask you this question as a college professor, they struggle to maintain enrollment numbers in Africana Studies courses. So what can you say to the students out there, regardless of their major, the importance of why they should take those courses? We don't struggle at Nassau with enrollment in most of our courses in Africana Studies.
Okay,
I think, good.
Yeah, we get good percentage of enrollment. But, just for the student in general, what is the value of Africana Studies? You know, Marcus Garvey was a great leader from Jamaica that came and created, you know, one of the greatest black organizations here called the UNIA. And one of his statements was that a tree without roots, a people without a knowledge of its past, is like a tree without roots. And so if African history is the first human history, if African people are the first humans, if African people built the first civilization, then no matter what your humanity is, you are on a branch without the root knowledge of what humanity was at its origin, you know, without the Africana Studies curriculum as its foundation.
Wow, and thank you for that. And unfortunately, we will have to pause right here. And I say pause because I want to have you back for another go-round at this. But we would definitely like to thank our guest today, Dr. Ptahsen-Shabazz, educator and chair of Africana Studies at Nassau Community College, and author of the book, Black to the Roots, Reggae's Rise, Downpression and Reascension, for coming on to our show today.
Yes, indeed. Giving thanks indeed, brother. And man, anytime that you call, very grateful for the opportunity.
Once again, my name is Kevin Boston Hill, and thank you all for listening to Instruction Discussion, right here on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.